Hey guys, this is for the full moon tomorrow in Scorpio, which will be at 11 degrees. And I'm just going to get my pointer so you can see. I'm going to show you another chart as well from AstroSeek so you can get to see what you might look at if you use an online app, because this that I'm using is SolarFire. So there's my pointer. So you can see the moon is here and the sun is 11:20 and the moon is 11:20. So the sun is in Taurus at 11:20 degrees and the moon is at Scorpio 11:20 degrees. So this apparently something I learnt yesterday is called the Beltane and full moon. And this full moon arrives on the 1st of May and it's named the Beltane or Beltane, the ancient Celtic fire festival that marks the midpoint between the spring equinox and the summer solstice. And it's a threshold moment and what's understood is that the veil between worlds is considered thin, not in a way of, maybe that we can see it, but the veil which looks towards death and our ancestors, but in the direction also, meaning not in a way which looks towards death and ancestors, but in a direction of quickening of life force, rising of things that have been held underground and now pressing upwards towards the light. So if you think like the flowers are coming through and things are coming through. And as this is a Scorpio full moon on a Beltane, it's about as a potent a combination that we can get, because Scorpio is the sign that knows what lives underground. So Scorpio is psychology and it's the unseen and the taboo. And also it's what is rooted in the dark that we don't see behind closed doors, what has been gestating, perhaps painfully, or perhaps without our full awareness. So it's probably, a situation where we get some things brought to light that in this time. And the sun at 11 degrees of Taurus and the moon at 11 degrees of Scorpio. And it's the opposition, as we know, with a full moon. With a new moon, it's when the moon is conjunct the sun. And, this is, I don't know if it has been, I haven't gone and looked back to see if there has been a full moon on the 1st of May. I'd have to go back and look, but I haven't looked. So it's illuminating a full moon and it's also doing so with precision on this chart. So the Taurus Scorpio axis, you've got Taurus down here. It looks like Gemini, but I'm going to show you another chart briefly before I go ahead so that you can really get to see this. So this is from AstroSeek. You see down at the bottom, you can see, I need to get my pointer again. So let's see here. And you can see that at the bottom in this corner here where my little marker is, it says online horoscopes and it's astro-seek.com. So you can look at your own charts there and put in your birth date and time and it'll pull up a chart for you if you haven't done that before. So this chart is clearer than the SolarFire because I'm using more planets and also it shows more aspects. So the Taurus Scorpio axis, so you've got a big chart here beginning with Aries, 0 degrees, because it's a collective chart. For my own chart, it's 27 degrees Scorpio. So when you look at your own birth chart, you're not going to see that this way if you put in the exact birth time, your birth time. So the axis is Taurus and Scorpio, and its value, Taurus, and depth, and of what we hold and what we are willing to release. So what do we hold? Our values, and what are we willing to release? The Scorpio aspect. What can we look at that we no longer, or that we're willing to release, because we accumulate much, and what we need to, release so that we can move forward. Taurus is the body, the senses, the physical world, what we can touch and count and call our own. And Scorpio is everything that's underneath, it's the inheritance, the wound, power dynamics running beneath the surface of the polite arrangement. So we have a polite arrangement with each other, human beings often. And then we have this other side that we're unaware of, like what we've been seeing with the politics and various things that are going on in the world, what's hidden from us, what's out of sight. It is the sign of what cannot be said in daylight. The full moon here pulls these two into direct confrontation, the visible and the hidden, the named and the unnamed. And at a personal level, this is a moment when the body knows something before the mind catches up. So pay attention, to what tightens, you know, us, what makes us go into stress, because often we can be very heady and think with the mind, but the body often speaks to us and we ignore it. So, if you're feeling stress in your body, or you are in the presence of somebody and you get a feeling of the body that tells you that it's no, you can listen to that. If you're in a work situation or friendships that maybe, we need to move on from or such like. So what rises as a feeling of rather than thought. So it's what do I feel rather than the thought, which I just explained, not to get out of the head. And the Scorpio full moon tends to surface what we have been successfully managing not to look at. So what we haven't been looking at sort of comes to the surface, and it can do this with a kind of, ruthless grace. There can be grace in it, and it's a gift. This is a gift because we do need to look at things maybe that we've been avoiding. And there is a T square, but not quite. I will go back to solar fire and move the chart ahead, but so we can look at some other things. But if you look, it's not quite a T square, but if you look at the Pluto, which is up here, and you look at the moon and you look at the sun down here, it's crossed over at 5 degrees. When that was at 5 degrees, which would have been in the last, let's say, 12 hours, I'll give an example, it may not be exact. So it's been going towards, the moon is moving towards Pluto and the sun is moving away from Pluto. But if we look at a T square, just out of interest, what that means, so it would be, you can see that it's combined here. So the Pluto in Aquarius at 5 degrees, then it's the moon, and then you go down here and you've got the sun, and then you've got the opposition. So this is a T square, and it's a configuration of pressure, of energy that, where there's nowhere easy to go. Pluto is the axis planet, it's the apex planet, sorry. And Pluto doesn't do things gently. The sun square Pluto, moon square Pluto, the interpretations are about struggles of control, of power dynamics, on the compulsive need to manage outcomes as at a collective level. This is very significant at this time with what's going on with various wars, and also the lack of fertilizer that is apparently not being shipped around the globe, which can cause problems later down the line. So we all need to be mindful of this, not to go panic buying, but just be aware that, with what's good at the moment, it's like enjoy the good things, because we don't know where this is heading. Unless things are resolved, then, if farmers cannot grow vegetables and such like, which is very Taurian earth situation, and then all of this hidden stuff of, what we're not being told as well. So we are watching something play out in the world stage that has everything to do with who holds power. So what's interesting with Uranus moving into, which it has, you see it's 0 degrees 18, it's directly on my sun. It's been at the moment at 0 degrees because my natal sun is 0 degrees Gemini. And this is about the people. So, Gemini holds the third house, and it's about local interaction. It's not traveling, far away. It's local interactions, and it's going to be there for the next 7 years. So this is really a good thing to be aware of, that we've got this communication. It's becoming more local and moving away from the power sources. This is more about our daily interactions around and about. So if this is not an exact, T square going on here, but if we look at it, it intensifies this Taurus Scorpio axis. The sun in Taurus squaring Pluto speaks of economies, land, resources, because Pluto's involved as well, the power embedded in material communicate accumulation and how that power is increasingly being exposed. So we can see that there is power that's really not for the people, which Uranus is for the people in Gemini. It's more, and Pluto as well in Aquarius. Depends how you look at these things, but this is how I'm definitely seeing it. And that power is increasingly being exposed, destabilized, and reorganized. So we've got a huge reorganization going on. I think a lot of people are a bit nonplussed about, the politics, just the hierarchy of what is seen, what we see. And the moon in Scorpio squaring Pluto amplifies an emotional register of collective grief, the collective rage, and the things that are surfacing from the deep that perhaps we knew were there, but we could not fully face. And this would include, things that are hidden and then not, and then pushed aside. And we're beginning to see how really, the leaders, significance, insignificance, how the people are important, that we are important, that our lives are important. We're living very simple lives, many of us. We're doing our work. We need to look after our health, and those things are being put to the test at the moment also with the situation with resources, which is Taurus as well, and inner resources, and also resources that we need and what we value. And the moon is trine, I believe. Let's see, the moon is in a trine to the North Node. And the moon, where's Jupiter down here? Jupiter. So there's a contact there with Jupiter. And there's also, looking at this chart, there's the Uranus in Gemini. So we know that moved in a couple of days ago. And Uranus at 0 degrees Gemini. And this is very charged because historically there's a lot of things that have gone on when it's hit 0 degrees. It's about 84 years around the chart. So you see here, it will take 84 years to orb all the way around the chart. So it's worth looking where 0 degrees of Gemini is in your chart as well. So the 0 degrees of any sign is the purest, most unfiltered expression of that archetype. It has not yet learned to modulate itself. It arrives like a frequency that has just been switched on. So something's been switched on. I will say that that was 0 degrees in Gemini last year. I think around maybe the late summer, and it then went retrograde. So this is its final ingress now. And Gemini in the sign is the sign of language, communication, information, the nervous system, of culture, and how ideas travel, how narratives are constructed, how we speak to each other across distances. And Gemini rules the printing press and the pamphlet, the telegraph, the broadsheet algorithm, and the feed. It is the sign of the twins of duality, the twin duality of the question which story is true when there are two contradictory ones being told at the same, simultaneously. So we can see that we can look at things at the moment and we really don't know what we're, told, whether it's true or not. We have to double check our information that's incoming. And Uranus is a disruptor. It's, known as the great disruptor, the awakener, the planet that breaks open structures that have become rigid, because we know there's been a lot of rigidity. There was much more rigid stuff going on when Pluto was in the sign of Capricorn, and then it came out and it's now at 5 degrees Aquarius, which is to do with the people, our hopes, dreams, and wishes. And it's not straightforward, but we know that it's more for the collective. And Uranus in Gemini asks with some, it asks with urgency, what happens to the mind when the information environment it lives inside is fractured, accelerated, or weaponized. So we can see all of those three things, that the information is fractured, it's accelerated beyond comprehension, and it can be weaponized as well. So Uranus, a bit of history. I'm going to go back to my solar fire here. Hopefully you can see that. So Uranus at 0 degrees of Gemini in 1775. And this date is the year before the American Declaration of Independence. And that was the moment when the revolutionary impulse that had been building for years finally cracked open into action. But what made the American Revolution possible was not simply the military force, it was a revolution in information, which is worth knowing. And Thomas Paine's Common Sense, published in January 1776, sold over 100,000 copies within 3 months. So Thomas Paine, Paines, something called Common Sense. So that was published as a pamphlet, I think, and then sold over 100,000 copies, an extraordinary number for the time, because the printing press, think of the things that were so different then. The printing press had become the instrument of political consciousness, the pamphlet, the broadsheet, the colonial newspaper. Those were the means by which a new political reality was constructed. So at the moment, new political realities are constructed through media, through Instagram, through Facebook, through YouTube, and we can see how things are circulated, and it is very fractured, definitely. And it's also been made legible to the ordinary people, and we've never had access to things on this level before. And also on the other side of the world in 1775, there was an old order that was cracking open. In 1775, Karim Khan Zand of Persia landed a siege of Basra, one of the most strategically significant cities in the Ottoman Empire, sitting at the confluence of, it's called the Tigris. I can't maybe pronounce it properly, but somebody may know out there, and Euphrates, I believe, but again, I could have got that wrong, the ancient gateway between empires. So it's very interesting when we look back at history where Uranus was, or where any planet was. The Persians took the city and held it until 1779. So that was Uranus in Gemini, the beginning of that. Two imperial structures fracturing at precisely the same moment, under precisely the same sky as we all are. And the British grip on its American colonies began to fail in the West, and the Ottoman dominance over one of its most prized possessions beginning to fall in the East. So Uranus at 0 Gemini in 1775 was not simply a revolution of information, it was a disruption of the empire itself in two hemispheres. The old orders did not yield quietly, and they never do, but they yielded. So the historical resonance also of 1941, the previous Uranus in Gemini cycle. Let's go back to 1941 and check this actually, out of interest, to make sure I know what I'm talking about. Let's see, 1941. So I'm just doing the same date as today in 1941. And if you see, Uranus was in Taurus, so it would have been a bit later in 1941. So if we go months ahead, 1, 2, 3. So we got 0 degrees Gemini, the 1st of September 1941, would you believe? So the previous Uranus in Gemini cycle then, which was the 1st of September, I've got here 020, 1941. You can see 00 and the arc is 20. The Second World War is underway. This was an era of radio. So we had radio as the primary instrument of mass communication. And with it, because of radio, we still had the propaganda on an industrial scale, though, and the BBC on one side, and then, other people being involved in that. And, it can be brutal when people, because it's controlled information of the environment. So at the moment, we're quite fractured. It would have been maybe simpler than propaganda, because there wouldn't have been much way, there wouldn't have been great ways like now of getting information to people, but we still don't know if what we are seeing is real or true. So we need to double check anything that we see. Before you post something, just double check, is this authentic? Is it real? So we can see what shaped reality in the people and the reality of people. And then there was Bletchley Park, apparently. The code breakers were working to penetrate enemy communications and to intercept the coded language of power and to expose it to those who needed to act on it. And this is Uranus and Gemini at its most concentrated, the fate of the world hinging on who could read, decode, transmit, and control the flow of information. And now, if we look, really how things are changing and jobs are changing and coding is changing in such a big way as well. And now we're here again, 0 degrees, and this ingress is a new cycle beginning. So there you go. You got it here. So look to where, if we come back to today's date, that would be good. I'm going to go to the 1st of May. It's tomorrow, 1st of May, 2026. Whoops, no, going a bit farther. I'm going to 2026. Okay. Okay, so we're back here with the moon at 11 degrees 20. And we have Uranus, the fractured information field. Um, what does it mean for us now in 2026? We're living through what might be seen as the extreme disruption of information in the environment in human history. And it's not through a single technology, but through the convergence of several all together, like Facebook and all of these other things. I know they came earlier, but, Facebook, or I think YouTube's 20 years old. And then all of these other things that we're still learning how to use, the social media, the architecture of that, and the rewards that people can get through that if they become successful on that, the artificial intelligence that can generate convincing language without understanding platform algorithms, which I know very little about, and also that we've had things that a lot of stuff going on that have privatized the commons of public discourse and the nervous system of the collective with this as well. So we have to bring ourselves back down to earth. Uranus, Gemini, it's really important we do things for the nervous system of the collective. It's because it's genuinely overwhelmed. I don't know about yourselves, but the more information can really be screw the mind, in many ways. It's like I don't know where books will be heading, reading a book. I love to read books, but the way things are going, it's like, will the book continue? Will people be doing other things? I hope books always exist, but who knows? So we've got the nervous system of the collective is overwhelmed. And in that overwhelm, the question that Gemini, is looking at is which story is true. So check your stories. Even if you see something that, that looks amazing, it could be an AI thing, it could be AI, and then you post it and you realize that it's actually been made by AI and there's no reality in it whatsoever. I'm sure we've all done that. I've done it, and I'm sure many people have as well, or thinking somebody said something that they didn't say in, the public arena. So Uranus can be shocks. It's not always bad shocks, but it can awaken us. It can be shocking when we realize something. A lot of people don't realize I'm coming up, anyway. I've had my second Saturn return, and I can tell you that the skies were much bluer when I was younger. And in 2020, blue skies, and real fluffy clouds. And a lot of people that I speak to, and I point out the trails that are in the skies, that they're not clouds, that's not normal. A lot of people are completely unaware of that, which I find quite shocking. So, that's just one arena, and then also how pharmaceuticals have been told that that's the best thing for us. And again, things change and we realize that actually, the wool has been pulled over our eyes, or things are not quite what they're made out to be, or they're doing different things because we're learning all the time as well. So the disruption is not the end point, which is good. It is the pressure that forces new capacity into being and thinking. And what that might be. It's going to be different. It's a different relationship to discernment, you know, having not the passive consumption of information, but being more selective. We can be more active, more embodied, which is really important, and also more willing to sit with not knowing. We don't have to know everything. Like, you know, it's okay to say, I don't know. And there are things we will not know. Even astrology can't tell us everything. You know, it's just we're looking at we're reading, what are we doing when we look at a chart? We're reading where the planets are, what houses they are in. We're reading the aspects to, I know that it looks a bit crazy, the aspects in here, but we're looking at what is going on with the aspects. And then we're looking at the history and we're talking about it and we're working out what the meaning is. And, you know, it can be a useful tool to understand ourselves. If we take our own natal chart, that's how I prefer to use it. Like, it's not so much for prediction, but understanding how do I heal the wounding that I have, or where am I best, where is my time best spent? What are my gifts? What are my downsides? What do I need to work on? When the 20th of June, this is Chiron here, which is the wounded healer. And Chiron in Aries is moving to Taurus on the 20th of June, the 20th, and then it will go retrograde at some point. And then next year in 2027, it will remain in the sign of Taurus. So we have a way to go, but it will dip in, it will ingress, and then, you know, in Chiron in Aries, it's a sense of our being has been violated in some way. And we may fear asserting ourselves, which happened during the COVID period as well. People were afraid to assert themselves. And then what else have we got? Also physical, you know, the physical wounds where we suffered. And then also, if I look at when that goes in, you know, this is more about resources when it moves into the sign of Taurus and our values. So, where we're going here is we're looking at the next thing. Okay, so we're looking at this Venus, Saturn. Let's look at Venus here. Venus is in the sign of Gemini, and it's also Saturn. Where's Saturn over here? Saturn. So it's in a sextile to Saturn, if I'm correct there. You can see actually on that day, which is interesting. So, and it's almost exact. So this is, you know, quieter, it's stabilizing in the midst of all the scorpionic energy and intensity and the Pluto pressure and the Uranus disruption. So there's something here about what endures. You know, it's also about relationships with the Venus and our values and our needs, because it's Taurus and relationships. You know, and it's about not what's glamorous but real. So I think a lot of us, myself, you know, I'm sort of seeing the glamour drop, like, which is a good thing, like where we've based our lives on glamour. I'm sure some people are still, you know, in that mode, but around me day to day, it's more about earthy and being, you know, people being themselves. And maybe that's to do with the Saturn Neptune in Aries, I've noticed. And, you know, this is about the value of what has been built slowly with care. And Saturn conjunct Neptune, the dream and the structures are in conversation, our dreams and the structure. And also we have this Pluto up here, which is trying to Neptune, and it's also trining to Uranus. I think this goes on for about a good 2 years, you know, which is, it's very beautiful to see that this sextile, and trine, I believe, almost it will be when Uranus moves on. I believe that's the case. So Pluto adding a note of long-term purposefulness, you know, to all of this intensity. So it's not about destruction for its own sake. There's something, we're building something that was not yet visible. So we're definitely doing that. So what this full moon is really looking at 11 degrees of Scorpio, is asking us to go underneath, to not accept the surface, to hold steady within an information environment that is deliberately, we have to say, designed to disorientate us, to look for the coded language of power and to understand what is actually being communicated underneath. Very interesting. What is being communicated underneath? The power and control. If food resources become very difficult, this is control. And this then is to do with the oil and it's to do with fertilizer. And again, that is, that can be manipulated, which is not good. We need to really get more conscious in the world and society that we're not allowing such things to take place where we're causing suffering to each other. So Scorpio is all of that stuff that's underneath, and it's always been the sign that can sit with the darkness without being consumed by it. And I'm Scorpio rising, so I get that. Like I've been through a lot of trauma in my life, as many of us have, and somehow, I've gone through stages of being consumed, but overall, I've landed to a point where I'm not consumed by it, you know. And it's not because we're immune or I was immune to pain or what, where, we can still be having those feelings and be aware of them. But it's because we've learned to trust the process of transformation. And that Scorpio ultimate message is, learning about that. And Uranus, I keep talking about Uranus, is the voice that has switched on now. It's raw, it's unmodulated, it's broadcasting at a frequency that reorganizes whatever it touches. And we have been at this threshold before in 1775 and 1941. And each time, what hung in the balance was the question of whose words would constitute reality. So who's telling us the truth? Yeah. I mean, I find politics fascinating in that I've never been into political parties at all. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with people that are into political sides, but I don't see sides. I've lived long enough to see that, yeah, there are good people that do good things, and then there are people that do not so good things. And really, there's no one better than the other. And we need a different structure for this as well. We don't want one person or a couple of countries ruling the whole world. But in history, you know, the game's changed over the years of who holds more power here, there, or everywhere. So also, so each time, so we've hung in balance the question, if we remember, the words, what, who is, what constitutes reality, and who would get to speak, who gets to speak, who would be heard, and what's this configuration of mind communication can it, will emerge through the disruption. So in a way, disruption is not a bad thing, because when things get disrupted, then it means people begin to ask different questions and look at things in a different way. So on balance of this, the Beltane, which I learnt about yesterday, it's where fires are lit on hilltops apparently, and it's the threshold onto something where we've not yet been. And the full moon is the threshold also, whatever there's been going on, you know, compositing in the dark, and what truth has been waiting in the Scorpionic underground, because there is truth in Scorpio. And this is the moment that it was going to probably surface. It's often not without cost and it's not without intensity, because Pluto's involved and that's what Pluto brings. But the moon, is doing its thing, as we know, and Venus sextile Saturn is holding the value of what matters, and Uranus at the first degree of its new cycle. There is something beginning here that none of us have yet fully seen, which I think is a good thing. So just pay attention to your nervous system because of this Uranian energy. Take it seriously. I use magnesium glycinate for sleep time. I also use ashwagandha, which is in drops. It's a herb that's very safe, but don't take my word. Go and get checked out wherever you need to get checked out. But that keeps my adrenals in you know, in a good way and keeps off that cortisol bouncing around. So the nervous system, also Taurus. And then, so we're going to, whatever we're witnessing, what is true to what is hidden. And that's it. I'm going to leave it there. Let me know where the full moon is for you. For me, it's in my 12th house. So when the moon moves into my 12th house, I tend to go quiet for a few days inward. I'm just going to look. So if we go back, this is this is GMT, this is UK chart. So I think the moon is actually at 16:22 British summertime. So take the UK time and then, you'll know if you're in California, it's 8 hours behind. If you're in New York, then it's 5 hours behind. 6:22 p.m. And if I go hours back, let's say here, you see the moon moving. So at 4 degrees, it goes into my 12th house. So for me, overnight, it's moving into my 12th house. So there you go. Right. Thanks for watching, and subscribe if you have not subscribed. And also, you can book me to have a session if you look at my link in the description box.